Good morning. Once again, it's good to see all of y'all and be here with you. I'm glad that Greg mentioned different things that were going on in other congregations. I've been trying to stay up to date on things and to read articles as they come out. And some of the things that have come through some of the readings is that the church has struggled in different areas with different things. Some have thought that we should never have closed the doors in the first place. I'm not talking about this congregation particularly. I'm just saying as a whole in the United States, we've had some difficulties. And some believe that we should have closed them faster. Some are having some issues with the mask situation, and there are some divisive things going on there. And you know, the devil never rests, does he? He's always trying to do whatever he can to divide God's people. But I believe that through all of this also comes a new found respect for what we do here, and that God's going to use this to take those who truly want to be here and to grow us into more mature Christians and to develop us and create disciples in the likeness of what he would consider a disciple. And that's what we've been talking about this morning, is discipleship and fellowship. We've been talking about it this month. We began last week with our sermon series on following Jesus. What does it look like to be a true disciple of Jesus? And we talked about how our whole life changed. Our whole life changed when we committed ourselves to following Jesus. That my life changed when I committed myself to following Jesus. And I'm sure your life changed as well. And we talked about what that looked like. And we know that we didn't suddenly, at least I didn't suddenly become a mature Christian as soon as I was baptized into Jesus. I didn't suddenly become a mature Christian, but I did become a forgiven sinner. And at that point, that motivation drove me and encouraged me and strengthened me and moved me towards a deeper and more meaningful relationship with God and his people. We start out, right, with enough faith. We talked about this last week, with just enough faith to leave whatever it is that is keeping us from fully committing ourselves to Jesus. We started off with enough faith to leave that behind. Remember, we are symbolic nets. To leave those things behind, to get up and to go. And that's all that we are asked to do at first, right? Just get up and go. To trust, to have enough faith to get up and leave behind what we need to leave behind and to go. And at that moment when we made that decision, we were baptized into the possession of the Father and the Son and the Spirit. We are saying that I will follow you. That's the statement that we're saying. You know, maybe not perfectly and maybe not fully matured right off the bat, but we are saying that I will follow you. That whatever this new life that you're inviting me into, Jesus, whatever this new life looks like, whatever it calls me to do, I will submit all to you. That I will submit myself to the one that has all authority over all things. I will submit everything to you. And that's ultimately what we're saying when we begin this journey, when we start this journey. And from that point forward, our whole worldview is different, isn't it? Everything that we thought and we used to believe to be true, and all the things that we used to see as good things that we used to do in our life, a lot of those things start to lose significance, and they lose momentum, and they lose meaning to us in light of this newfound life that we have in Christ. Things began to lose significance, and they grow dim to us as Jesus grows brighter as we are walking as disciples of Jesus. It's a totally different worldview. And even with people, we begin to see people differently. We begin to see one another differently. We begin to look at marriage and relationships differently, don't we? We begin to look at parenting differently in light of this new walk, this new life that we have in Christ. And really just life in general. We wake up in the morning and we just see things in a different light because of our commitment, because we had the boldness to stand up and to say, I will follow you. everything changed. Everything changed in light of Jesus. And so this morning, I want us to look at a verse, and we'll be looking at the rest of the verses as well, but I want us to focus on this one and this proclamation that is made by this person who comes to Jesus, a scribe, and he says to Jesus, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. I will follow you wherever you go." So I want you to imagine yourself, just kind of put yourself in the place of this particular person, and you're standing there before Jesus, and you make this proclamation to Jesus, and you say that I will follow you wherever you go. Are you willing to make that kind of bold statement? I mean, think about it for a minute. Think about where they were and how Jesus has been received up to this point. Even in Matthew's gospel, we see that people are not all receiving the message, just like they didn't all receive John as he came to prepare the way for the Messiah. And this man decides that he's going to stand up and he's going to make this kind of proclamation and to say this thing. So put yourself in that person's place. Are you willing to stand up before all these people and make that kind of claim? To make that kind of proclamation that you're willing to stand up and wherever he goes, you're going to follow Jesus, that you will follow him. And really, we see this kind of idea, and this is what we are saying when we are baptized, isn't it? I mean, it really goes back to that moment in time when we made that kind of statement to say, wherever I go, right? Wherever I go, and whatever I do, however my life goes, I will follow after Jesus. And make that claim, and we make that kind of statement that I have died to the old life, the one that used to be so important to me, the one that used to be my only life, the one that I lived so fully, and I thought, man, this is the only life that I have. I've got to live it up. I've got to live this life to the fullest. And I was willing to die to that old life and its old desires and its old ways, and to be raised into a new life and have a completely different worldview. How challenging is that for people to change who they are and what they think and the things that are important to them? I think it's incredibly challenging. I know it's challenging for me to change the way I think and the things I do and my habits. It's challenging. It's challenging when we are called to do that kind of thing. But that's the kind of commitment that we made, isn't it? When we began that journey, when we were raised up to the newness of life, that's the kind of commitment that we made in Jesus, that we will be willing to go and to follow. And whatever, wherever, however, we're willing to do it. So here's my question. How are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing with your walk in Jesus? How are things going for you? How well have you kept this commitment from the time that you made the commitment until the present? How well have you kept this commitment? And I'm sure that in the moment, at that time, when all things seemed right and all made sense, and you made that commitment, that you were sincere, weren't you? You were sincere when you made that commitment. And I'm sure that at that moment, you would have done anything, right? You would have given up anything. You would have done anything and sold anything and given up anything just to follow after Jesus, the one who saves us, who rescues us. You would have given up anything. And I'm sure that you were sincere in that kind of commitment. But you see, discipleship begins with that, doesn't it? That's the beginning of that kind of commitment, but doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. It keeps going, right? And we have to be able to keep the momentum going. We have to be able to continue to be encouraged. And if we're truly honest with ourselves, now let's just be honest with ourselves for a minute. If we're truly honest with ourselves, we haven't, have we? I haven't always lived up to the commitment that I made when I first decided that I was going to follow Jesus. And I'm sure that you could say the same thing, that you haven't always. I haven't always. And if we're really honest with ourselves, we can say that. But you know, being a disciple, it's costly, isn't it? It costs us something. Being a disciple comes at a cost. And we have to be willing to make that sacrifice. And we made sacrifices, didn't we? We made sacrifices and we did things that lined up with the teachings of Jesus, and we committed ourselves to those things. Maybe not always perfectly, but we do need some renewal on that, don't we? We need to be reminded that discipleship comes at a cost. And remember from our last lesson, we have to remember that we laid down some nets, right? We opened our hands and let go of some things and left them by the shore, left them at the boat to get up and to go and to follow. And we need to make sure that we're not going back over there and trying to pick those things back up again, right? And trying to carry them along with our walk in Jesus. But we made that commitment. We recognized that it came with a cost. To let go of whatever and whomever is keeping us from fully committing ourselves to following and to heeding the call to get up and to go. So turn with me to Matthew chapter 8 and verse 1. Matthew chapter 8 and verse 1. We're going to see several people in this section of Matthew. If you remember, the context is Jesus is coming off the Sermon on the Mount. He's coming down the mountain. We're reminded of Moses. And he's coming down to the people of Israel. And people are going to start coming to Jesus. And so I want us to look at a few people who come to Jesus. I want you to put yourself in their place as they are in certain circumstances and situations that they have different worldviews. And I want you to try to put yourself in their place and think the way they thought and understand the life in general, the way they understood life. And as disciples of Jesus, I think this is incredibly important. It's incredibly important to take ourselves out of our own comfort zone, to deny what we may have had in life and to put ourselves in the place of somebody else, right? To say, you know, I know that you don't see things the way I see things. I know that your life is not the way my life was. I know that maybe you didn't grow up the way I grew up. Maybe you didn't have things that I had, or I didn't have the things that you had, or whatever that circumstance may be. Our life has been different up to this point. And to go out as Jesus commissions us and to make disciples, we need to have that in our mind, that not everybody is going to come to Jesus with the same worldview that we have grown up with. And that's incredibly important in making disciples. So look at verse 1. It says, when Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him, and a leper came to him and bowed down before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, see that you go and tell no one, but go show yourself to the priest and present your offering that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. So leprosy, think about having this disease. It's a horrible disease. It's not something that you just get over, sleep it off and take some vitamin C and get better. That's not what leprosy was all about. Leprosy was a death sentence. It was spending the rest of your life away from society. When somebody found out they had leprosy, they were doomed to spend the rest of their life away from the world, isolated, away from everyone, away from their families, away from their friends, away from those who they truly loved. They had to stay away from them because this disease was so contagious. And even when they walked through the streets, they had to cry out that they were unclean so that people would know and not get too close to them. And so this is the kind of person that is coming to Jesus. And think about that person's worldview. How do you think that person views life? How do you think you would feel being in that situation? How would you view life if you were this person? And you come to Jesus because you know that this one can heal you and make you well and give you what you most desire in life is fellowship, friendship, relationships. That's what we're talking about, right? I mean, it's not that they just went off and died. They spent the rest of their life in isolation, away from their families, and they needed that. But this is the kind of person that comes to Jesus, right? This is the kind of person broken and hopeless, and they come to Jesus for healing. But look what he says. He says, Lord, if you are willing, right? He doesn't say if you can or if you will or maybe you can. He says, if you are willing. It's like saying, I know you can if you so desire. If it be your will, you can make me clean. If you are willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus, he stretches out his hand and he touches him. Now, did Jesus have to touch this man? I mean, was that a prerequisite for cleansing? I mean, was that how that worked? No, of course not. Jesus could heal somebody with a word, a thought. Jesus could heal somebody. But instead of just healing this man, he reaches out and he touches this man who is an untouchable person, right? How long has it been since this leper has been touched by another? Nobody's willing to touch a leper. But Jesus is willing. He reaches out and he touches him and he cleanses him of his leprosy. So picture yourself in that person's situation. Now look at verse 5. In verse 5 it says, and then Jesus entered Capernaum and a centurion came to him. Now a centurion was a Roman. So we have starkly different, we think about the leper and we think about him as a Jew because of Jesus' command to go and present himself to the priest. That was part of the old law. And so that was a Jewish person who had leprosy, and now we have this Roman person who is in a totally different circumstance. His life seems to be going pretty well. He's a centurion, which means he's a commander of probably about 100 or so. That's the idea of centurion, of Roman military personnel. And so that's his job. That's his work. And he comes to Jesus. So there's a huge contrast here between these people. And so picture yourself in that person's position. What's your worldview? What do you think about? What's your life like? Especially in compared to a leper. And see what he says. He says, imploring him and saying, Lord, my servant, one of my servants, right? Not me, not one of my kids, but one of my servants. One of my servants is paralyzed at home and fearfully tormented. And Jesus said to him, I will come and I will heal him. He's willing. He's going to go. He's willing to go. But in verse 8 he says, but the centurion said, Lord, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy for you to come into my home. I'm not worthy for you to follow after me. I need to be following you, right? That's the idea. I'm not worthy of your presence in my home for you to come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. In verse 9, for I also, he says, I'm a man under authority, right? And of course, by saying that, he's acknowledging Jesus' authority, right? I'm a man under authority with soldiers under me, and I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and he does it. See, that's what he's recognizing, that Jesus has authority. He has power. He's not only able to heal, but he doesn't even have to be there. He has the authority to heal his servant who is being tormented. Look at verse 10. It says, now when Jesus heard this, he marveled. He marveled and said to those who were following, truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. See, this Roman centurion had a faith that marveled Jesus. Isn't that amazing? That Jesus sees this man's faith and he's marveled. And he's looking at all of Israel and he's thinking about Israel. And we'll go to chapter 23. There's a lot of woes in chapter 23. And Jesus is sorrowful over the condition of Israel, God's people. And here is this centurion coming to Jesus, accepting his authority, accepting his power, and Jesus is amazed. He marvels at this man's faith. Verse 11, he said, I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and recline at the table with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. So he's talking about us, isn't he? I mean, that's the idea. He's saying that there's going to be people from all over the world. That's the general idea of east and west and north and south. All over the place, people are going to start coming, and they're going to be allowed to dine at the table of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the fathers of Israel. But other people, not from their blood, not from this lineage, not from this group, are going to be allowed to come in and dine at the table in the kingdom of heaven. That's us. That's good news. That's good news for us. Verse 12, but the sons of the kingdom, these Israelites by birth, they will be cast out into the outer darkness. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So there will be some of Israel who will not even benefit from what Jesus is offering because they're going to reject him. They're going to reject his authority. They're going to reject his power and ultimately reject his deity. And they will be cast out into outer darkness. And Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, it shall be done for you as you have believed." And the servant was healed that very moment. See, Jesus' authority over sickness, over death. Jesus has authority to heal. Jesus has authority to save. And he's willing. And he's willing. Verse 18. Sorry, let me get caught up on my slides. Verse 18. Verse 18, now when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to depart to the other side of the sea. And then verse 19, it says, then a scribe came to him. So a scribe, what's a scribe? Well, this is obviously a Jewish person who was someone who copied the law. That was their responsibility. That was their job. They were recognized as people who were experts in the law, in the Torah. And they knew it, and they copied it, and they made fresh copies for the people of Israel to have. And these people were considered experts in all things of the law, all the writings, all these ancient documents that they would have kept and preserved. And so think about that for a minute. Think about this particular kind of person who knows about the law, knows about the prophecies of the Messiah, and he comes to Jesus. And Matthew's pointing this out to us. This is the kind of person who's going to come to Jesus. This person here who knows the law of Moses. And he says, teacher, this was our verse, right? This is where we started. Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. Follow you wherever you go. I was trying to come up with a good analogy, but all of my analogies are food analogies. I don't know what that says about me, but I was trying to think of a good analogy on this. So let's say you're on a diet, all right? And so you get up in the morning and you're feeling good, and you haven't really eaten any breakfast yet, you haven't had any coffee, and you think, yeah, you know what? Today's the day. This is it. I'm going for it. I'm starting my diet. I'm not going to eat anything bad. I'm going to eat everything healthy. I'm going to stick to it. This is it. Today it begins. Here I am. And from, I'm going to exercise right. Maybe, I don't know. I'll try. I'll give it a shot. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to do whatever I can to change my health situation. And you commit yourself to that. You commit yourself to that. And then dinner time rolls around. Somebody brings, I'm not going to mention any names. Somebody brings out the cheesecake, caramel on top, the little chocolate chip sprinkle. I love that. And you think, maybe today's not the day. Maybe I'll wait till tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow will be the day because I really want this. It's something that I desire. It's something that I want. I made that commitment that morning, but it didn't take too long before something came into my life that caused me to derail and come off track. And if we're really honest with ourselves, think about it. If you're really honest with yourselves, we do the same thing with Jesus, don't we? We do the same thing with Jesus. We wake up in the morning and we say, today, wherever you go, whatever I do, whatever I say, I'm going to follow Jesus, that I'm going to do it, that today's the day. And somebody brings out the cheesecake. And we question ourselves. So what Jesus says in verse 20 is kind of shocking, but it's kind of not. It's kind of shocking in the context, but for those of us who have followed Jesus and have worked our way through this and we have struggled with these things, it's not all that shocking at all. But what he says in verse 20, he says, foxes He says, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Now you would think that when Jesus heard this man in this proclamation, he would say, good job, good for you. Come on board, let's go. Follow me. But he doesn't say that. He says, if you want to follow me, if you truly are honest with this claim, if you really want this, you have to know something about me. You have to know that foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. See, there's no doubt that Jesus is king, right? He's king of a kingdom that is not of this world. He's otherworldly. And for us to be disciples of this king, to be citizens of this kingdom, we have to be otherworldly. We have to recognize the fact that this world, with its ways and the things that this world does and its temptations and all this world has to offer. We're talking about world. We're not talking about planet. We're talking about people. That's not our home anymore. We can't feel comfortable in that life anymore. That's uncomfortable to us now. And we have to recognize that there's nowhere that we can go in this world except for here, right? The assembly of God's people, where we can feel comfortable with people who are in the world, but not of the world. And if we're going to be disciples of Jesus, you have to first count that cost, don't you? That's his point. Count the cost. Recognize that it's going to cost you something. Look at verse 21. Verse 21, it says, another of the disciples said to him, so another disciple, somebody who was already following Jesus, right? So another disciple comes to Jesus, or is with Jesus already, and makes some statements in following part of the verse. Lord, permit me first to go bury my father. In verse 22, but Jesus said to him, follow me and allow the dead to bury their own dead. Now, when you first read that, it sounds kind of insensitive, doesn't it? I mean, when you first go through there, you're thinking, well, I don't understand. Why can't this man just go bury his father and then come back? I mean, why is Jesus saying these things? It seems insensitive. But I don't believe Jesus is saying that to be insensitive, and I don't think he's saying that to tell us that we can't go have funerals and things like that. I don't think that's what Jesus' message is. But I want you to put yourself, once again, in the shoes of this person. He's following after Jesus in the flesh. He's listening to Jesus in this world. And the point is that I believe that the point is that if you're there in the present and you haven't truly grasped Jesus, right? If you haven't truly grabbed a hold of him and understood the significance of his existence, that there will be other things that will seem more important to you than following him. But if you grasp it, if you understand it, if you've truly grabbed hold of what Jesus is doing in the world, the fact that he has come into the world as Emmanuel, as God with us, that nothing else is going to matter to you, that even the mundane things of life, even the things that are important in life, are going to have little significance in light of following Jesus at that moment. And I think that's the point, isn't it? That at that moment, in that time, that this man needed to think of nothing else but continuing to follow after Jesus. If your mind is on something else, at that time, you truly don't understand the significance of the moment. You don't understand what is happening. Follow me and allow the dead to bury their own dead. There's so much in this life. So many things. And we get distracted with those things. But folks, we have to understand there's no such thing as a part-time disciple. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a part-time disciple. There's no such thing as a disciple that lives in the world every day and then occasionally comes over to Jesus. There's no such thing. It's all in or nothing, right? That's what Jesus is calling us to. All in or nothing. There's no such thing as a part-time disciple of Jesus. Either you're going to come to him, you're going to grasp his significance, the moment, the timing, understanding who he is, and you're going to give up everything and you're going to follow him, or you're not. Or you're not. And no doubt, Jesus wants people to come to him. He wants people to come to him, and he wants them to say, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." right? He wants people to come and say that kind of stuff to him, right? He wants people who are lost, people who are broken, people who are hopeless, people like the leper, people like the centurion, people like the disciple, to come to Jesus and to say, I will follow you, like the scribe said to Jesus. And Jesus will look at them and he will say, if you're going to follow me, you have to understand. You have to understand that foxes have holes and birds have nests in the air, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. You have to realize that. You have to understand that. Following Jesus will cost you. It might cost you your job. Might cost you a friendship, might cost you a relationship with family. It might cost you some money. It might even cost you your life. It might cost all those things. Those who truly see Jesus for who he is, who understand what he is doing in the world, will be able to see that the sacrifice is worth it. That's the point. It's worth it. It's worth it to let go of those things for a time. It's worth it to set aside those things and to follow. It's worth it. It's worth it to say that I will follow you wherever you go and mean it. Understanding the cost, it's worth it. When you were baptized into the Father and the Son and the Spirit, you were saying, I will follow you wherever you go. That's what you were claiming. That's the kind of proclamation that you made before people, that you will follow Jesus wherever he goes. Whatever this new life looks like, wherever it takes me, I will go. I will submit all to you, the one who has authority over all things. I will submit everything. So how are you doing? How are you doing? Maybe you're here this morning and you haven't made that commitment. Maybe this is the first time and you're thinking, you know, I'm willing to pay the cost. I'm willing to take that risk and sacrifice everything for Jesus. And you're here this morning and you're ready to commit yourself to that and make that kind of proclamation, or maybe you just need to be renewed in your commitment. Maybe you've followed for a while and have gone away or allowed things to distract you in life and you need to renew that commitment. This is the time for renewal. This is the time for new beginnings. If there's anybody here this morning who needs to come forward, please do so as we stand and sing.